Chapter 18 is called Cost, Volume, Profit because it starts to analyze how costs and amount of units you produce and profit, overall profit, are interrelated. So, as certain costs move in certain directions, that affects profit. As the amount of units you produce changes, that affects profit. So it gets at a lot of these different relationships. We start off the chapter by talking about different types of costs categorically. First type in study objective 1 is variable costs. These are the kind of costs that vary with the amount that you produce. So you look at this graph right here, and it's a pretty good way to show us that. This graph relates to this example that's right up here to illustrate. And you can look variable costs as the amount of radios produced increases down here on this horizontal axis. The total variable cost of this item goes up proportionately. Okay, and what that means is the variable cost per unit has to be the same at every level of activity. So things like materials and labor, maybe those are the two examples that strike me. There are other examples that you can come up with, but there are certain costs that vary exactly in the same rate across all levels of production. Okay, and so you can see this linear line going up in cost as the amount of radios produced increases. So look through that example and see if that can make sense to you. The next kind of categorical costs are fixed costs. These are costs that remain the same no matter how much is being produced. So if you look at this total cost graph here, you can see total fixed costs are still $10,000 no matter what the number of radios produced is. This is stuff like property tax, or maybe your insurance on your factory. These are amounts that you pay per year, per time period, not depending on how much you produce. So you have this kind of curve graph here when you look at cost per unit. Since the total cost doesn't change, the more you produce, the less the cost per unit is. So this is not really a critical idea in this particular chapter. This is more important really that you understand that fixed costs don't change no matter what level of production you have. Then there are certain, one more thing before I get into the next study objective. Study objective 2, a little bit confusing the way it talks about relevant range, but what relevant range basically is it's the idea that companies really only care about cost behavior within the range of activity that they expect to operate under. So like General Motors, they're not going to make 10 cars a year, and they're not going to make 10 billion cars. They're going to operate in a range of manufacturing somewhere in between. And so they care about how costs behave in that relevant range. It shows you a little bit how the graphs look, variable costs and fixed costs within a relevant range. Right here, I'm sorry, this is the illustration I was meaning to get to. So in this shaded area here is where companies would care about the relationship of cost to production. All right, they don't care about down here because they're not going to be in this activity level, or up here because they're not going to be in this activity level either. Fixed cost, same thing. They're going to care about fixed cost levels where they expect to operate. All right, it doesn't matter that fixed costs are really high at this level of operations because they're not going to be at that level of operations. And then mixed costs, I'll talk about these in the next video.